The check engine light is on code P0520 and P0522. Okay. Welcome to another Garage Time with Goody. Today what we're going to do, we're going to change the oil pressure sensor on a 2014 Dodge Journey SXT 3.6 liter Pentastar engine. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it a different way than probably what you're used to. I'm going to try to do it the easy way. Most people, if you look right here, this is the upper intake, upper manifold. A lot of people call it different things, but we're going to not take this off. Usually, see right here's the top of where the oil filter goes, and this is the oil cooler. Here is a diagram that breaks down all the parts of the oil cooler and the sensors. And usually you have to take the top upper intake off, then the lower intake, and then usually you access the oil cooler. That takes quite a while. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to do a different way. I'm going to try to take off the breather and move a few hoses around and try to change out the oil pressure sensor from the side and skip all that long process. Now, the first thing you want to do before you start this job is to disconnect the electricity from your car. In this case, the battery is located underneath the front driver wheel well, and this is the connection point right here, which you want to go ahead and disconnect it right by the fuse box. This is going to be the negative wire. Take that out, set it to the side, and this is a 15mm socket, by the way. Then I'm going to disconnect the positive. Anytime you're putting in anything electrical, you want to disconnect the battery. There is the positive, and there you go. You're safe to work on it now. Some of the things you need are, and I will leave a link in the video description. You need a special socket for the oil pressure sensor. This cost $11 on Amazon, and for $35 I was able to order an OEM original Mopar oil pressure sensor. That's where we ran into trouble, is whoever ordered the oil cooler replacement, it came with sensors that are generic, and the sensors last about 4 months. So if you ever replace your oil cooler, be sure to either take off your old sensors if they are okay on your oil cooler, or buy new ones from Mopar that are brand name. You don't want the cheap generic ones that could fail in a couple of months. Okay, with that in mind, we're going to get started. Okay, the part number, the latest revision of the oil pressure sensor from Mopar is 05149062 AB-001. And this is what it looks like. The first thing we're going to remove is the breather. And right here where the filter box is, there's going to be 4 8mm bolts. And I'm going to go ahead and loosen those. Then we're going to disconnect this vacuum hose right here. It should just pull out. And then up here are going to be some vacuum hoses. We're just going to disconnect those and set them out of the way so that it's going to give me room to take this breather off. I'm going to set these over to the right, out of the way. And up here you'll see that there's a clamp, and it's also 8mm. And I'm just going to go ahead and loosen the breather. And I'm going to go ahead, once it's loose, you just barely pull. It should come out just like this. And I'm going to lay it over to the side. Can you stop it? Yeah. This right here is the air filter housing. And as you can see, as it goes up here, there's a metal arm that's hooked to a Torx 30. And what I'm going to do is remove the air filter box. I'm going to remove this plastic insert right here. If you can't get it to come up all the way, you can use a flathead screwdriver, then use a plastic pry tool and just wiggle it back and forth and pull up. Now once you remove that T30 bolt, you're just going to kind of push in and lift up, and that should come out just like that. It should lift out. Breather box is out. Also, I recommend you, once this is out, you may want to get a new air filter. Hardly anybody maintains their air filter. You may want to put a new one in right now. As you can see, this is the front view of the engine. As we go down here, after the breather box and the filter box is taken out, we're going to see a view of the side of the engine. There's the upper intake, and as we look to the right, you'll see on top is the oil pressure temperature sensor. That is the one that's not malfunctioning. It has the red tab, and the one right below it that's going into the oil cooler is the oil pressure sensor. What we're going to do, we're going to take that socket with a swivel head and a 3/8 ratchet, and we're going to get that out of there. And all of that without removing the upper intake. So I'm going to have to stick my hand in there first and unplug the plastic connector. Okay, my hand is unplugging the plastic connector. And that's going to be out of the way. See, just like that, that's unplugged. Let me show you guys. This is the plug-in for the oil pressure sensor. And over here, let me move that out of the way. That was the cord for, in the top is the oil temperature sensor, and in the bottom I have just unplugged the wiring harness to the oil pressure sensor. And I'm going to go ahead and put that special socket in there, and it's a deep well. It will go over that plastic housing, and I will unscrew that sensor. Now what we want to do, you want about a 6-inch extension on a 3/8 ratchet, and you want a swivel head or wobble head, whatever you want to call it, and then you put it on this 1 1/16 socket. And as you can see, this is made especially for that oil pressure sensor. I'm going to feed it down here, and it's going to have to go in at an angle, and you'll kind of look where the plastic is, and then the angle you want is you want to get it as even and flush as you can. And see, once it's flush, you can feel it go back that far. Let me show you how far back it went. How far back it is. You can see that it's on the sensor, and I'm just going to turn it counterclockwise and back it on out of there. And now, as you can see, the sensor is out. I'm going to stick my fingers in there. Now, if you can't stick your fingers in there, you can get the long needle nose pliers and pull it out. But this is the old oil pressure sensor. The one on the right here, that is the old one. One on the left is the new one. And it has Loctite already on the threads, ready to go in. Okay, as you can see, I've got the oil pressure sensor out. You'll see that there's a little bit of oil coming out, and on the top is the oil temperature sensor. I'm going to go ahead and start this new sensor by hand, and then I'm going to put it in by the socket. But first, you want to get it started by hand so you don't cross thread the sensor into that aluminum oil cooler. When you put the sensor back into the oil cooler, you will want to start it by hand first. Be careful not to cross thread it, and then put your socket in, and then tighten down the sensor to 12 foot-pounds, and that's it. If I have a problem, you could too. So I have the socket, it's a little stuck in there, and I'm going to use these needle nose pliers to grab a hold of the socket, to wiggle it a little, back and forth, and pull it out of there. As you can see, I got the new part in there, and I got out the socket with the pair of needle nose pliers, and I just pulled it right out. You want to be careful with this wiring harness that has the silver over it, because you do not want to break the wiring harness. Okay, so just be careful as you're doing this process. I'm now going to reach back and plug in the sensor. Then I'm going to start the car to make sure that that's not leaking. As you can see now, I scraped my hand a little bit, but I was able to get the wiring harness plugged back in. And I'm going to start the car and see if this is leaking. And of course, there is the temperature, oil temperature sensor. There is the oil pressure sensor, also known as the sending unit. And that in the background is the oil cooler. And also, while you're in here, you can look down in the valley of the engine, and you can notice if it's to the oil cooler, if they've been leaking or not. And in this case, they have not. And so the oil cooler is good. Now, the original oil cooler is a plastic one, and this has been replaced with a metal one. And it seems to be holding up pretty good. So, once you have made sure that it's not leaking, you can go ahead and place the air filter box back in. You want to line it up with these two holes right here. The rubber grommets just set right up on those two bolts, and lift this plastic shroud up right here in the front, and then just tuck this underneath and make sure it sits down in here. And then you're going to need, okay, so you're going to need the plastic push pin. It goes here like so, and then you just put the pin down in there, and then that secures that. And then you'll put the T30 on there. And then you're going to tighten it down, just like when we took it off. Okay, it's on there good and tight. I recommend replacing the air filter. Put that back on there. Now we're going to want to take the breather box and we're going to want to run it up here where it connects, and then put this over the air filter. In the back here, I'm going to tighten down the breather. It uses an 8mm socket, and you just get it a little bit snug. Don't over torque it. Then we're going to want to take this hose. Don't forget, before you tighten down the top of the breather, it plugs in right underneath the upper intake. So push that hose on, and then you're going to tighten down these 4 screws that are on each corner of the breather. It is also 8mm. That's tight. And you do not want to forget your vacuum lines. This one right here, this back up to the upper intake, and then this one right here, it goes behind the map sensor right here. Hook it up, hooks up to the upper manifold. Make sure that these 3 vacuum hoses there are hooked up. This one by the breather box is hooked up, and you should be good to go. And now you can start the car and see if your labor has paid off. As the car warms up, the oil pressure should start to go back down. For the first time since I changed the sensor, it had a P0520 and a P0522 check engine code. And the pressure, even when it first started up, would not go below 96 psi. So I had a compression test done to make sure it wasn't really having high oil pressure. I had that done at a garage because the adapter, I would have had $200 and something in the adapter, and I don't plan on working on a whole lot of 3.6 Pentastar engines. If I was planning on working on a whole lot of 3.2 and 3.6 Pentastar engines, it would help me to get that adapter, because then I could test the oil pressure, and then I wouldn't have to go to a garage. Luckily, I had a friend at the garage. He tested the compression, and it was fine. And we determined it was the sensor. So I got the sensor. I ordered it online, got it for 35 bucks. That's almost twice as cheap as if you go to the actual Dodge dealer. They usually charge like $60. I got an original Mopar part for $35. I bought that socket, which cost me a whopping $11. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I showed you the way to change the oil pressure sensor, the fast way and the easy way. So you don't have to remove the upper intake or the lower intake or disconnect the fuel rails or that whole route. So hopefully you've learned something from this video and you like this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. Tell me your thoughts in the comments section below. In the end, here is what the oil pressure is holding at now, 30 psi. And everything is good. No check engine lights. We are ready to hit the road. Another one bites the rust.